Hello, friends and neighbors, sisters and brothers, and all you citizens of the world. Welcome to another edition of Heartland at Home. This is number 35 for the week of January 16th. It'll be posted on youtube.com/heartlandmedia. And today we have two guests. We're looking forward to talking with Dr. Sherry Rogers about her latest film, Shared Legacies. And then we're going to have our buddy, Nicholas Barron, talking about his artwork and his music. But first, Tom, how about giving us a little information on something good that happened to you this week?
Well, as some of you know, I do a lot of the cooking around here, but it was a real joy this past week to have not only my daughter, but my grandson make fish stew. And I'll tell you, it was really good, and we got 2 meals out of it.
What kind of fish?
Oh, we had octopus and cod and shrimp and potatoes and celery and peppers and seasonings. My daughter.
Celery fish, potato fish. I like that.
It was a fish stew. It was really, really good. Katie, what about you?
I'm sick of hearing you guys talk about eating well. I'm telling you. These two, above and below, they have families. They have kids who cook for them as well as they cook themselves. Okay, the good thing that happened to me this week is because of this radio show, I got to see a really good film that reminded me of why we fight. And that is the film Shared Legacies, which we'll talk to the creator of in a few minutes. How about you, Michael? What good thing happened to you this week?
Well, it's actually about to happen. I'm about to turn 79 years old, and who would have thought I would have lived that long? So on January 16th, in between Martin Luther King and Muhammad Ali, also a couple of other good friends like Mike McGraw, I'm turning 79. I'm having a birthday. I had hoped to be in Hawaii, but the pandemic cooled that out. So next year when I turn 80, we're going to have a party, and I don't know where it'll be. So
well, that explains our entry music, everybody.
Absolutely.
Thank you. How about what's going on in India? Some of you may have been watching the news and know that Indian farmers, thousands and thousands of them, have been blocking the roads, protesting legislation that Prime Minister Modi or President Modi, I'm not sure which he is, Prime Minister, put into effect. But it's not good for the farmers, and the Supreme Court did not struck it down, but they stayed it. They put it off. So the farmers got a little bit of a victory, but not all the way, and they haven't moved. We'll keep.
Well, we want to bring that up just to remind people the rest of the world is still spinning, because this week wasn't much going on here.
Nah.
Let's see. Last time we talked to you, we were still in full post-traumatic stress from the Epiphany. That is January 6th in Washington, D.C. So let's see. First of all, the Congress came back and did their job, finished their job. Certified the results of the election. Second, they looked to Pence for about 5 minutes to ask him if he would pull an amendment, 25th Amendment thing when he showed no inclination.
What a spineless lemming.
Well, let's try not to be too hard on him yet. He could come in handy. Then the next thing they did was immediately pivot to impeachment proceedings, which as we speak, 1 week later, we have for the second time, impeached you-know-who. Couldn't be happier about that. Let's see what the Senate does when they send it to them, which probably will be post-inauguration.
Well, what's interesting is that the Senate could get a Supreme Court justice approved in 6 days, but they don't feel like they have enough time to bring to trial a impeached president for a second time. Come on.
Interesting, isn't it?
Stand up. Do your duty. Find a spine. It's about time after putting up with this, beyond silliness, something that really threatened the Republic. And 5 people are dead. And now Congress people, while I'm getting ahead of ourselves here, are catching COVID because of this incident. It's bizarre. I'm waiting for manslaughter charges to start coming down. This, rioting thing is hardly pales in comparison to what has happened in the last week.
In addition to all the other goofballs, there was an Olympic athlete in the mix, right, Michael?
There was, and I'm blocking his name on purpose.
Good. Let's continue to block his name forever after. Okay. So
Katie,
What
what's
else happened?
happening up in Portland?
Well, the Powell Bookstore, which is the famous great bookstore out in the West Coast, had some demonstrators in front of it, what they called far left activists surrounding the bookstore to protest that or to ask that they stop selling a book by someone named Andy Ngo, NGO, which is about the inside Antifa's radical plan to destroy democracy. The thing is, see, folks, when you do this, and they were open outside only anyway because of the COVID, these guys were so overwrought about it, they had to close the store early. And what's going to happen next? That book is going to make big sales. Thank you for letting us know it exists, guys. Why do those that censor try to not get that? I don't know. Anyway.
Whenever we try to do book burnings or censor books, we're just bringing more attention to it. And that's in a moment when there are all sorts of serious First Amendment issues that we need to be looking at. I mean, there are 30 million voters of the current occupant of the White House who can understand why he's cut off from Twitter and other forms of public communication. I think there are good reasons why a private company cut off someone who was fomenting riots. But aside from that point, there's some fascinating First Amendment issues being raised in the midst of all this other stuff going on. Talk about fake news.
Okay, let's go back to COVID. Just so you probably already know, but COVID is taking its toll. December was the deadliest month yet. An American dies every 20 seconds. And there'll be a lot more post January celebrations, New Year's, etc.
I wonder how many more after the super spreader event of January 6th, when we had 40,000 or more demonstrators in the Capitol without masks, some of whom broke into the Capitol, some of whom were in this lockdown with their fellow congressmen who they gave coronavirus to. We've got 3 Democratic congressmen having come down, having tested positive. Now, do you think the Republican congressmen are going to let us know that when they test positive? I don't think so. I don't think so.
No, but they are still refusing to wear masks. And now they're walking through or around additional security barriers that have been put up in the Capitol because, I don't know, are they carrying themselves and don't want to be caught? So we're moving on from COVID, but let's not move on from it quite yet. It's very encouraging that we have this vaccine going, and certainly the healthcare workers on the front lines who have gotten their first or second vaccine are overjoyed. But we do have this issue with so many people being hesitant that some doses aren't being used across the country. In Illinois, we're only getting 33,000 doses a week. We have 600-some thousand healthcare workers that have to be immunized. When they add us, who are over 65 in a few weeks, that's 3 million more people. Do the math. We got almost 4 million.
I'm already confused by the math.
We already have 4 million people who will be in the next tier of stuff, and we're only getting 30,000 vaccines a week. It's going to be a while, folks. Keep wearing your mask, keep safety things going. It'll be summer, I think, at the earliest before we can roam about freely.
This has already also been an active week in our own capital in Springfield, Illinois. Historic change in the Democratic leadership of the House due to close proximity to some corruption questions. Our 40-year head of the Speaker of the House, Mike Madigan, has been set aside. There's a fellow named, pardon me?
I said maybe.
Right, true. There's a fellow named Chris Welsh who would make it the first African-American Speaker of the House were he to proceed. There's a bit of an asterisk behind his name, which we'll find out more about. We'll keep you posted as we go forward. We're going to keep our own state rep, Kelly Cassidy, on speed dial to find out what she does next because she voted present yesterday on this particular selection. So Yeah.
I was going to say one of the things that did come out of the legislative session, the special session, was no more cash bail. And there was no real movement on cannabis legislation and equity licenses. Tom, maybe you could fill us in on what role LaShawn Ford played in the House on that bill.
Well, after there being a lot of discussion about trying to level the playing field a bit, at the last minute, a Senate-passed bill did not come up for a vote in the House because LaShawn Ford is concerned about the way existing licenses were going to be treated. It's a real mess. The whole equity license rollout has been a mess. We'll have to keep on top of it. We also did not get an elected school board, despite widespread support for it, both in referenda and other things. On the other hand, the Chicago Teachers Union did get some major concessions that every other union in the state currently has, which is that collective bargaining can now move beyond just salary and benefits to also include school conditions like classroom size and stuff that CTU has been fighting for ever since they lost those bargaining rights back in '95.
Well, you brought us closer to home now. So let's talk about police reform. Michael, what did you have?
One of the things that's kind of interesting is Alderman Vasquez, who was recently a guest on the show, and 35 other alder people in the city council have called for the resignation of the head of the Friends of the Fraternal Order of Police. And that would be a guy named John Catanzara, who just recently put his foot in his mouth and tried to pull it back out after kind of praising the demonstrators in Washington who invaded the Capitol. This guy is, he's really a bad person and not someone we want to have head of a so-called police union in Chicago.
Do either of you know where that call for his resignation is going at this moment? Do we know? Not yet, right?
No.
That would be a great improvement in the city of Chicago to get that guy stopping being the mouthpiece for the police.
It would be better for the police to do it too. I mean, the police want to have good relations with the community. Get someone in there who cares about the community.
I should think. Well, this is, Michael has deigned to share his birthday week with the inimitable Martin Luther King Jr. And for years, we had a wonderful January birthdays party because we used Martin Luther King's holiday and the fact that so many of us have January birthdays as an excuse to dance and have a great time together in the old Heartland Cafe. But today we're happy to have the excuse to use it by bringing you a conversation with a producer of an incredible documentary called Shared Lives. We're going to start by sharing
Shared Legacies.
I'm sorry, Shared Legacies.
Okay, we all make a couple mistakes.
Somebody wrote something wrong in here. Shared Legacies. Let's start by sharing the trailer with you, and then we'll be right back with Dr. Sherry Rogers, the director and creator of this Shared Legacies.
There's an African proverb that says if the lions don't tell their stories, the hunters will get all the credit. I'm telling you the story now because you're young lions and lionesses.
My great-grandfather had been in slavery, and it goes across generations. You just don't get rid of it simply because there are no chains on you.
The effects of slavery are still very prominent, just as the effects of the Holocaust are still very prominent amongst our brothers and sisters in the Jewish community.
The Jewish people have the DNA in their soul to look up close to what happened to African Americans after slavery.
We came to the South, young Jews, rabbis, many of them refugees from Nazi Germany. We hear Dr. King quoting the prophets. That was extraordinary. It made us proud.
Rabbi Abraham Joshua Heschel said, "The future of America will depend on how it responds to Dr. King."
It was the work that Dr. King had spoken for, fairness, equality against anti-Semitism, and for freedom for Soviet Jews.
A large Jewish presence in the civil rights movement was evident almost from the beginning.
Well, Stan Levinson and Harry Wachtel were lawyers who were working with Dr. King. They were advisors, marchers, fundraisers. They were in the thick of things.
Many Jewish students worked all across the South. And I will never, ever forget 3 young men, Andy Goodman, Micah Scherner, and James Shaney.
Birmingham is Birmingham.
We all know the Exodus is the central narrative of our redemption. And here is a modern situation. Shall we do nothing?
We could not have gotten anywhere had not Protestants, Catholics, and Jews showed up from all over the world.
Rabbi Yaakov Prince spoke immediately before Dr. King.
The most shameful and the most tragic problem is silence.
The civil rights challenges of our time, the human rights challenges of our day, they hang on me. They hang on you. They hang on who? They hang on us.
We all need to get together to find out the bigger picture. Those who have been stepped upon have to lead the way.
It's all about our humanity. And if we don't figure out a way truly to work together, we'll just be like hamsters on a wheel. The systemic oppression and issues will just continue.
There are too many people living in fear. If Rabbi Hersher and Martin Luther King Jr. were here today, I think they would be saying, we need to pull together for the generation yet unborn.
The soul of America is at stake.
Wow, this is very exciting. Dr. Sherry Rogers, thank you so much for joining us today and this perfect weekend to have you, the time of remembering and honoring Dr. King. That trailer is enticing. How are people supposed to see your film at this point in time? I watched it all last night. Is there a way that we could tell people right off the start?
Well, they'll have to go to film festivals. Actually, on Monday, we're going to be at Lincoln Center in New York, which is amazing. But I think it's geo-blocked to New York, sadly. But if you want to see the film, it is going to be at film festivals, and you can look us up. And we have not theatrically released it yet.
Okay, so let's just talk about what is the story that you wanted to tell in Shared Legacies, the film documenting this storied alliance between Blacks and Jews in America during the Civil Rights Movement. It's a powerful film, and it features very important figures. Made my heart beat softly to see C.T. Vivian and John Lewis. Tell us how this came about. I think it was in Selma where it kicked off for you, isn't it, Doc?
Well, no, I actually met Dr. Martin Luther King's personal attorney and draft speechwriter in Detroit, Michigan at the Charles Wright Museum. His name is Dr. Clarence B. Jones, and he was chosen by Claiborne Carson at Stanford University to be kind of the inside mind of Dr. King because they had developed their own Martin Luther King Center at Stanford. And he had written a book, What Would Martin Say? And one of the chapters was on anti-Semitism. So as a woman, a Jewish woman, listening to this amazing lecture at the Charles Wright Museum, I, started a conversation with him after the lecture, as I do when I go to a lot of lectures with whoever is speaking, if they move me. And we developed a friendship. And at the time, he was going to be a few weeks later being honored at the Kennedy Center for Performing Arts. And the Obamas were going to be attending. And from our friendship, I ended up going. And he speaks about a lot of things when he speaks, Clarence B. Jones, about the commitment to nonviolence of Dr. King, of the strategies Dr. King used, and how the importance of the movement. But he always says, if it were not for the Jewish contribution for the civil rights movement, it might not have happened as quickly as it did. And he feels that it is the commitment of the Jewish people that helped to transform the conscience of America. So as a Jewish woman, I could appreciate that this is an American history story about coalition building. And I think now more than ever, it's needed.
Absolutely. I want to say that some of the conversations that you had with Clarence and the daughter of Rabbi Herschel, Susanna.
Dr. Heschel, yes.
Dr. Heschel, thank you. Incredible. And the remembrances that some of the children of these people that you talked to was also quite moving. Maybe the shared trauma is the place we should start, because so many referred to it. The psychic trauma left over from both Holocaust and slavery was a unifying point. You want to speak to that just a bit, Dr. Rogers?
Well, sure. Thank you for the question. Well, I have my PhD in clinical psychology. So as a trained therapist, we learned a lot about transgenerational wounds. And while the Holocaust did not happen here in America, the wounds of that trauma carried over into America, into many of the Jewish individuals who were still living with that trauma, who couldn't speak about that trauma, but who many of them could identify in a compassionate way to the Black American experience. And at the same time, while their trauma or while their prejudices against them in America, whether it be that they couldn't get into, they couldn't get a job as a professor in a college, or they couldn't have the certain real estate, it was very different than the Black experience in America. They could, in a compassionate way, identify with what they had just experienced and witnessed. We forget that Rabbi Heschel's sisters were murdered in Nazi Germany. So his daughter, who is not just his daughter, but a Jewish scholar in her own right at Dartmouth, says he could have come to America and not got out of bed, for God's sakes, to have her sisters murdered. And instead he meets Dr. King at a conference on religion and race in 1963 in Chicago, okay? And he says, Rabbi Heschel says, it was easier for the Israelites to cross the Red Sea than it is for Negroes to cross a college campus. At the time, that was the word that used for Black Americans. And so he was able to use the Talmud and his Torah teaching from rabbis and bring it down to an injustice right here in America. And I think that is the beauty of Rabbi Heschel, that even though he was a conservative rabbinical scholar trained by rabbis in the Orthodox tradition, he was able to identify in a compassionate way to the terrible injustice and call racism Satanism to the clergy and really bring attention to that. And I think Dr. King, as a social justice prophet, he was first, as Clarence Jones says, a biblical scholar. So I think they could connect in this compassionate way to the Exodus story. And Heschel says, the Jews started with the Exodus story, but the Black experience in America will have to finish it.
Wow. Dr. Rogers, in your film Shared Legacies, you have wonderful contemporary interviews, but you use a lot of historical footage. What was it like to try to gather that stuff, get permission to use it? And how do you decide, once you gather this treasure trove, what you're going to end up being able to use? I mean, it had to have been hard to decide, once you got permission, which pieces to pick up on.
That's true, and expensive. I mean, it's one thing if you use it privately, but once you use it publicly and it goes to commercial, it's very, very expensive. But I think where I was really blessed with developing a friendship with Ambassador David Saperstein and Rabbi Jonah Pesner, who have a whole treasure trove of interviews and personal interviews that they had done with some of the civil rights folks that on the Black Jewish experience that many didn't know about. So for instance, Ambassador Saperstein had done his own interviews that really he hadn't put together on the subject. So I feel like I was blessed that he let me kind of scrunch through it all. And I spent days and days scrunching through it all to do this. And I also had an archival producer that was quite amazing. You need, it's like building a house. you need the right people to come together. So I had two amazing editors. One is in Michigan, a Jewish editor, Stuart Shevin, and one is Sam Pollard's son, who's amazing, Jason Pollard. He's in New York. Actually, Sam's film is going to be up for, I think, hopefully for a documentary on the FBI and Dr. King. But his son, Jason, is also an amazing editor. So we all kind of, it's a collaboration when you're building a film as you're building anything else in life.
Dr. Rogers, we always like to know a little bit more about the people we're interviewing. And I wonder if you could tell us a little bit about yourself, where you grew up, those kind of things, which kind of music you like, where you went to school. Fill us in.
Mm-hmm. Okay, well, I'm from Michigan. I live in Franklin, Michigan, and I went to school. I got my PhD at University of Detroit, and psychoanalytically trained. I have amazing 3 sons that my oldest son has, and my daughter-in-law, we have 2 grandchildren, Slade and Steele. I have an amazing husband that has been quite supportive. I think I had no idea when you're doing this type of documentary and passion, it's a 20-hour-a-day job, and it's a labor of love. So it's a lot of work. But ironically enough, I'm wearing The Rebirth of Jay Dilla. It's a t-shirt. And I was in Israel, and I had met, my sister lives in Israel. I have one Orthodox sister that lives in Israel, and I have another sister who lives in Las Vegas, who's Reform, and I'm more Reformed. But when I was in Israel visiting my sister, Shine was there because he couldn't get back in Michigan into America. He had just had that incident with Puff Daddy, and he was being interviewed. And I just started learning really more about rap and rap music and the connection and how important rap music was. So I actually, helped produce The Rebirth of Jay Dilla in Detroit, Michigan. And I brought Clarence Jones actually to that concert because I said to him, if Martin Luther King were alive today, to The Rebirth in 2012, and this was before I made the movie, I said, wouldn't he be talking to the rap artists? Aren't they the visual voice? Aren't they the journalists of this generation? Don't the young people, who do they listen to? Are they reading books? Are they listening to the journalists online? They're listening to the rap artists. So, he had to really think about it. And this was after he was just honored at the Kennedy Center for Performing Arts. But the Obamas there. So, and he studied this, and you know what? He said, you're right. If Dr. King were alive, he would be meeting with the rap artists. He would know that they are the ones who are seeing what's going on in the streets. And he would be talking to those folks. So I don't know, it's sort of a little, getting a little insight into me.
So can I ask you, Dr. Sherry,
Sure.
what did you have to do with that song that was the ending song, the rap song? Did you write that?
I contributed, I co-wrote it.
That's what I thought.
And
so
I spent the day with a Spelman student who really didn't know anything about this history. I mean, Mally Hunter, who's amazing, she works with rap artists. She did the score with Yale Strum, but she brought this amazing Spelman student. And we sat and learned all day, together, and we kind of crafted this together. And so I sort of, when she actually came out with it, after we crafted ideas and I put in what should be included, we sort of cried. I cried. I mean, and we hugged each other, and we just didn't stop holding each other because it was pretty emotional. I mean, it was powerful. And I just thought, even though there's so many elderly folks that are giving recollections to their history, if you want to appeal to the young people, it's got to be through rap.
Well, right there, the parallels between now and then are kind of hard to miss. And you do go into it when you bring in the story of Ferguson and the aftermath of Ferguson and the Black Lives Matter movement, addressing, delicately the dialectic around Palestinian questions, et cetera.
Mm-hmm.
Any ideas on how to address the racism evident in America today, or the growing anti-Semitism as the Holocaust generation dies off following the failed putsch last week in DC? I know that's a big loaded question, but have at it.
Well, you know, I want to be humble, but I have to say what I am proud of is that our film is being used to bring communities and folks together to have these really important conversations. And we can't underestimate the power of the arts to spark feelings and conversations. And I think, you know, it's small stones that you have to build. It's building bridges. And I think, you know, we understand the power of storytelling. And I think this American history story is an important story to tell about the power of partnerships, the power of alliances. We had differences then. We didn't agree on everything then, but we needed to find a common goal to work on. Likewise, we're still going to have differences. There's even, you know, there's Jewish people who have, you know, criticized the Israeli government. There's Jewish people who criticize this. You know, we're not a monolith, any one of our groups. So therefore, we need to find common goals to work on because we got a long way to go. We have come a long way, as President Obama says in our film, but we got a long way to go.
Wow, that sounds like an excellent place to thank you and invite people to find your film. It's called Shared Legacies. It is Dr. Sherry Rogers' little masterpiece about the alliance between Blacks and Jews during the Civil Rights Movement, but beyond as well, right? And thank you so much for doing this.
Thank you. Well, I don't mean to interrupt, but I just, if you don't mind, because this isn't live. So I just want to say our organization I'm the president of is called Spill the Honey Foundation. Right. And it was inspired by a Holocaust survivor whose mother's departing gift was a cup of honey. And he used his pain to inspire people all over the world. And we're going to take all the remaining 80 hours and create small, you know, little videos for it, 8 to 10 minute ones with a curriculum. So we can use that hopefully in schools throughout America to have these conversations. Because as you know, the younger people have about we all do have an attention span of about 7 minutes. So anyways, I just wanted to get that in. Spillthehoney.com if you want to have any more information.
Excellent.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Sherry.
Thanks.
Oh, freedom. Oh, freedom. Oh, freedom over me. And before I'll be a slave, I'll be buried in my grave and go home to my Lord and be free. Oh, freedom. Oh, freedom. Freedom. Oh, freedom. Oh, freedom over me. Over me. And before I be a slave, I'll be buried in my own grave and go home to my Lord and be free. No more weeping, don't you know? No more weeping.
Nicholas Barron, our good friend, our neighbor, our fellow artist, and wonderful
human being.
Human being, yes.
Wow.
Thank you so much for coming on and joining us in our quarantine land. We brought you on.
Oh, thanks for having me. Love you guys.
We want to highlight this beautiful song, which we're about to play, but I haven't heard it yet. So I'm going to ask you to tell us about Imagine Dreaming, please.
Well, yeah, I've been using this kind of Joni Mitchell tuning, and it kind of brings up certain emotions. And I started writing, and I often do this stream of conscious thing. And I wanted to write something for his birthday, and the words just kind of came out really easily, really flowed, and just really talking almost from a place of naivete, or like, imagine dreaming that you could change the world. Imagine dreaming that you could, imagine thinking that you're, dreaming higher than the mountain and looking over to see the future. And yeah, I just kind of, I wanted to be almost like not childlike lyrics, not super intellectual, but, coming from a more, spontaneous and vulnerable kind of a place, So yeah, that's how it happened.
So let's listen to Imagine Dreaming.
Imagine thinking you can change injustice by being the change that you won't see. And imagine acting larger than life by speaking the truth, being truly free. With God on your side, you see the clear path. Love in your heart, you do the math. Imagine dreaming higher than the mountain, looking over to see the future. Imagine letting your words flow like a fountain and heal the wounds that you fix like a suture. And God on your side, you see the clear path. With love in your heart, you draw the map. You draw the map.
You've been active during the pandemic. I've seen it online. So, Nicholas, what have you done more of in this time? Music or painting?
I have basically, I did 8 gigs between March 16th and now. I mean, I've lost all my gigs almost. And I started, I have a painting studio, and I painted every day. And so during the pandemic, in the beginning, I was writing songs every day, and I was doing a painting or two. Like I went crazy. I mean, I went sane basically, because it was the thing that kept me sane. And not only did I lost my income, but I ended up selling, I'll just say I sold a lot of paintings, and I got patrons and collectors, and I reached out to people, people that I lost my gigs, and people love my artwork. And, a lot of artists, I think, had this experience where people were really, they're in their spaces. So they were in their houses more, and they were, in these rooms. And so I guess artwork was something that was important. And so I have been painting. I've become literally, that's how I make my living as a painter. And it's kind of a miracle. I mean, I know that's a big word, but it feels miraculous to me because literally I lost all my gigs. So and I realized a lot of people have been suffering, and I don't want to make it seem like I'm.
We're going to show some of these recent paintings that you shared with us, but I'm curious if you could tell us who influenced your painting. Are you self-taught? You have sometimes kind of a Pollock look about your stuff, but it's almost not fair for me to say that because your colors are so much more vibrant and brilliant than that particular artist.
Wow.
What got you going with painting?
Well, the first thing was my dad was a painter. My dad was William Barron. He was a abstract painter and then a landscape painter, and was Roy Lichtenstein's assistant professor at Rutgers in the early 60s, and knew him before, babysat his kids. And so my dad, knew George Siegel, who's a famous sculptor. My dad was in the New York scene a bit. And so my dad was a huge influence. My mom is a painter. And my whole family are either crafts people or artists. Of course, I'm a musician too. And my dad lived in New York in the late 70s and took us to the Whitney and the Guggenheim and went to Soho. And some of the paintings I sent you guys are with a collaboration with my friend Pevin Everett, Baron X Arts collaboration, Everett Arts collaboration. And those are some of the paintings we did as a collab. He's a singer with the Gorillaz, who are a big, famous British band. He's also talented at a couple things. He's a polymath, I guess is the word as well. And so that's what some of the paintings are. And then the colors, I've been doodling my whole life. And I just started really, it's about experimentation, spontaneity, trust, and just love of being in the moment, being in love with freedom of expression, I think, and needing to express the pain or struggles or feelings or joy. Sorry.
So speaking of love and your arts, that was, by the way, some brand new information. You were part of that whole New York scene as a kid growing up. You lucky guy. Let's switch it back to the art scene in Chicago, particularly the live music scene, which just recently a couple of organizers who are also gig runners in Chicago, the woman from Hideout, another guy from, get the name of it, really made headlines by putting together a support system for musicians out of work. How do you think the living, performing arts scene in Chicago should return to us in improved fashion after the COVID period is up? And you know what that might look like? Or do you feel like imagining it?
I can tell you this, I know, and I can only speak for myself. I can, obviously I observe and so forth, but I think the do-it-yourself approach to making a living that's what I've been doing. So I've been doing house concerts and, doing more, having more ownership over my, music. The club situation has been shifting and changing for a long time, which I've also been a part of for 30-something years. So I'm not sure, because one needs to be careful. I just think everything is going to be different. And I don't have the answer. I know that the bottom line is money and keeping the doors open. What is that? How does that, it makes people a little less open to experiment and try new things. They may go with stuff that's more, saleable, so to speak, or you know what I mean? But for me as a do-it-yourself artist, I made my living more in the last 10 years from doing my own, creating my own shows and so forth anyway. So yeah, that's a big thing that's been happening.
Well, we'll see what happens with the local music scene and the national music scene. We all are waiting. We like to know what people have been doing to get through these hard and difficult times. And I used to see you up at the Y as this was coming on us. And I'm wondering if you're working out at home and what other things you've been doing to get through the pandemic besides painting and playing music. Are you reading any good books? You got any movies to recommend? You got any happy recipes? Fill us in.
Yeah. I did all those. Actually, I've been doing keto. I've lost 35 pounds since September, almost 40. And I don't know if you can tell, I was such a big dude, but the exercise thing has been a little less. I do stuff in my living room, and walking. But the keto thing has been, the intermittent fasting has changed my life. And I've been watching tons of, actually my girlfriend got me into watching The Wire, which I never saw when it was around in the HBO. It's wonderful. And I've seen so many shows. Shameless, and books, there's an Evanston artist named Emil Ferris. There's a book called Monsters. That's the most incredible graphic drawings I've ever seen in my life. Amazing, brilliant drawings, and other things too. And I'm always looking at art books, from my favorite artists. But and I've been cooking because I've learned how to cook. I was alone, and then I started doing keto, so I feel like I had to learn how to cook. So that's kind of the big change for me.
Nicholas, you talked about your parents, and you actually have written a song about your parents. We're going to use that song to take off and take out and go out. We want to tell us a little bit about the song and your folks.
I mentioned earlier, my father, my dad died 4 years ago. My dad was a painter, and my mother is also, she does line prints. They're kind of these white line prints. And my sister makes her living as an artist, both my sisters. So we come, it's, you know, an interesting and unusual and different kind of existence. So I'd always kind of wanted to write a song about, and this song is literally thanks dad, thanks mom, for literally being, living your life and living your heart and not succumbing to, you know, the fears that we all learn. Being an artist, you'll suffer, you'll struggle. I didn't have those things. I didn't learn those things from my parents. I learned that I needed to do it or I would suffer, which is the other kind of suffering. So, and so that's why I've always done my art, and I haven't really feared for worried so much about money and things. And it's kind of come and it ebbs and flows, but mostly it flows, I guess, really. But because it's my positive outlook on things, I guess, enthusiasm, you know. But they were both, and my mom's still alive, and she's my biggest fan. She knows a lot about art, growing up with being around my dad and so forth, and who was a prolific and known sort of landscape painter. So yeah.
Let's all think about our parents as we play Thanks Mom and Dad by Nicholas Barron, and thank Nicholas Barron for all the good you do. We really appreciate it.
Oh, thank you so much. You too, guys. Thank you so much for being here. Thank you.
I look forward to seeing you back at the Y.
Me too. I love seeing you there, man. Yeah.
Thanks, Dad, for living your art, never compromising your heart. Thanks, Mom, for holding your brain, being one of a kind and in your own lane. Thanks, Dad, for painting a life, paving a way so I could live right. Thanks, Mom, for the music and words and your sense of wonder and the absurd. And when all is said and done, we are our family's love.
I'm sure glad we had Nicholas back again. We want to catch you up on some other quick local neighborhood events. There was a phenomenal town hall meeting this week with over 200 participants via Zoom trying to save the High Ridge YMCA. Keep posted. We have all 3 area alderpersons involved now. The Y still hasn't responded to requests for a public meeting. They have suggested they'll have a series of private meetings. They do seem to have our attention. Keep tuned.
Or we have their attention. Okay. So Rogers Park also is going to be having to save yet another community space, the Glenwood Avenue Sculpture Park that the late Steve De La Rosa put together when he was alive and doing so much incredible artwork around the neighborhood. The folks who paid rent on that space are finished doing so. So keep aware of and keep your eye out for maintaining that lovely little public space.
One other thing you may want to tune into is the Hot House is doing a Hot House Meets Havana, 5 nights of jazz starting on Friday the 15th. Contact the Hot House for more information. It's going to be a great show. I know Tom and his whole family are going to be dancing around the living room. And on that note, we are really glad that you tuned in to join us. We've been here for 25 years doing Live from the Heartland, now during the pandemic called Heartland at Home. You can catch us anytime at youtube.com/heartlandmedia. We're on WLUW on Saturday mornings. We're on WLUW.org worldwide on Saturday mornings, and you can get us on CAN TV.
We want to say happy birthday to Michael James. And because of his birthday, we're honoring him with a song from his son. So let's all
do good in the world.
Because the world needs all the good we do.
All power to the people.